In this video, we will learn about lists and tuples in Python. Lists are ordered collections of items, and when you come from a programming language like JavaScript, they are similar to arrays. Lists are more flexible and powerful as they do not have fixed sizes and can store elements of different types. So let's look at how we can create a list in the Python programming language. So I'll define a variable called even numbers, and then I'll assign it to a list. Now in Python, in order to create a list, we use the square bracket. So in this square bracket, I'll put my even numbers quickly. And then I'll just put these even numbers here. So by so doing, I have created a list. I can check the type of this variable using the type function. So I'll just say print type, and then I'll pass in the variable. And then in my terminal, I'll run my file using the command python, then the name of my file, which is what, main.py. Now when I run my file, you see that we get class list outputted in the terminal. So this shows that what, this is the list object. So this is how we can create a list in the Python programming language. Another way we can create a list is using the list function. So I can create a list of, let's say, fruits, then I'll assign it to this. So using the list function, then I'll just pass in what, my list over here. So in square bracket, I can pass in my list. So maybe I can say apple, and then let's say mango, and then probably banana, and save. Now when I go ahead and then print the type of these fruits, let's see what we get. When I go ahead and run my file, you see that we get what, class list. So let me just comment that of the even numbers out. When I go ahead and run my file again, you see that we get class list. So this is what, a list object. So but most of the time you will not see a list created this way, or you will not create a list using the list function. You always use this literal syntax. So this is what we refer to as what, the list literal syntax, using what, the square bracket. So this is what I'll be using, and you see that when I comment this in, you see that my rough extension is giving me this warning, okay, that unnecessary list literal pass to what, the list function. So it's suggesting to me to remove what, the list, the outer list function. So most of the time you see a list created using the list, this square bracket syntax. So I'll just comment this out for you. Now one thing you should also note is that a list can contain another list, or a list can contain data types or different data types. So I can have a list. I'll just go ahead, comment this out, and then I'll just create a variable, let's say called elements, and then I'll assign it to a list of what, different data types. So maybe I'll just put the name of Bob here, then I'll put a number here, I'll put the boolean data type of true here, and then I'll put another one, false. I can put a list inside here, so I'll just put a list here of some numbers, and then save. So by so doing, let me just remove this comma from here. So by so doing, I have created what, a list of what, different data type. So this is being formatted like this because of my extension. So my extension is formatting this for me like this. Let me just do it like this, so it to be on the same line. So a list can have what, different data types, but most of the time you create a list of what, the same data type. So this is how we create lists in what, Python. And one thing you should note is that what, a list is what, a mutable object. What this means is that what, you can what, change the elements of a list, because these elements here or variable I've created here is just a reference to what, the items in the list. So this literal over here, this string literal over here is just a reference to what, the string object. So this element variable here doesn't own the list. Okay, so this, since this is a list, it is what, a mutable object, which means we can what, change the values or the items of what, a list. So let's look at how we can index a list or get an individual element from a list. So I'll just comment this one out, and then create a list of what, programming languages. So I'll just say programming, or let me just say languages. So I'll just put here languages, and then I'll assign it to some programming languages. So I'll just say Python, and then I'll put Rust here, and then I'll put what? JavaScript here. So this is just a list of what? Programming languages. So let's say I want to what? Access the Rust programming language here. I want to get the element of this list at what? Or I want to print out an individual element from this list. That's why we can use what we call what? Indexing. So I can access a list through what? Indexing it. So I'll just write the name of the list, and then in square bracket I can access what? The individual elements using their index. So the first element of a list is having what? A 0 index. Then the second element is having an index of 1. The third element is having an index of 2, in that order. So let's say I want to access Rust, it's having an index of what? 1. So when I go ahead and then assign this to what? A variable, let's say Rust, like this, then I print this out and go to my terminal. I'll clear it and rerun my file. You see that we are getting what? Rust outputted in my terminal. So you should know that what? Lists in Python are what? 0 index base. So the first element is having an index of what? 0. So let's say I want to get JavaScript. It's either I write the index, which is what? 2. When I go ahead and then, so now the variable is no longer what? Lang. So let me just change this to lang like this, so that this can be dynamic. It doesn't matter, but I just want everything to be in what? In correspondence. So when I run my file, it's that we get what? JavaScript. So let's say I want to access the last element here. I can use what? An index of what? -1. So you can use negative indexes as well, and you see that it's still giving me what? JavaScript. When I go ahead and then put another programming language here, let's say C++, and go to my terminal and run my file, you see that we get what? C++. So you can index a list using what? Negative integers. So when I go ahead and put an index of -2, so when I print that, you see that now we are getting JavaScript. So that is how we can access what? Individual elements of a list using what? Index. Now let's say I go ahead and then put an index here. Let's say an index of, let's say how many elements do we have here? This is our 4 elements. So let's say I put an index of, let's say 6, and go ahead and run my file. You see that we are getting an index error, list index out of range. So make sure that whenever you want to index your list, make sure that you don't access an index which is what? Out of range. So now we have only 4 elements over here. So the highest index here is what? 3. So the first element is having an index of 0, then the second element 1, the third 2, then the fourth what? 3. So you should take note of that. So when you pass in an index which is higher than the list, it will result in an error. So you should take note of that. Now let's look at how we can slice a list. Now we can extract a portion of a list by slicing it. The slice operation that we saw for string. So in the string video, we saw how to slice what? A list. So we can do the same thing over here. So I'll just comment this out and then comment this out as well. Then I'll come here. I want the comments to be at the bottom. Now in this languages list, we can slice it by using what? 2 integers, and which are separated by what? A colon. So let's say I want to access only these first 2 elements. So I'll just say let me just put a slice underscore list here as a variable. Then I write languages, and then in square bracket I can pass in maybe 0, and then I want to access what? From the first index, which is 0, and then this one, which is what? An index of 1, but I'll pass in an index of 2, and then when I go ahead and then print slice list, clear my terminal and run my file, we get what? Python, and then a list of Python, and then Rust. So why did I pass into here? Now the slicing is always n-1, or the number of elements in the list -1, or so whenever I pass, so this is the starting index, and then this is the ending index -1. So it's always going to be something like this: start, then colon, then end -1. So you should take note of this. Let me just comment this out so that it doesn't result in an error. So whenever we are slicing a list, we should know that what when we provide the start, it will start from there, and then the end, the next integer we provide or index we provide, it will what end there by -1. So this is an index of 0, 1, and then 2 by -1. So it will what come to the Rust. So that's why we are getting this list of Python and then Rust outputted in the terminal. Now, one thing I want us to note is that what we can do is we can omit one of these starting or end index. So let's say I go ahead, I'll just redeclare this variable, and then I say languages, and then I can omit what the starting, and then I'll provide the end. Let's say now I want to end at 3 here. So when I omit the beginning index, it will start from what 0. So when I go ahead and then run my file, you see that now we are getting Python, Rust, and then JavaScript. Now likewise, I can omit what the end index. So let's say I want to start from an index of 1 to the end. So it will start from the starting index then to the end of what the list. When I run my file, you see that now we are printing from Rust to the end of what the list. Now one thing you should also notice that we can provide what a negative index as well. So when I copy this down, and then I'm saying you should start from -1 to the end and go ahead and run my file, you see that we are getting only C++ because we are starting from what -1, and C++ is what -1. When I go ahead and then say -2, now it will give us JavaScript and then C++. When I go ahead and run my file, you see that we are getting JavaScript and then C++ to the end of the list. And likewise, I can start from 0, and then over here I'll put -2 over here. So this one, it will start from the beginning of the list, but it will omit the last two elements. So when I go ahead and run my file, now we are getting Python and then Rust. So that is it about slicing. Now we can provide a third integer as well, and that one will serve as what the step. So we can provide what a third integer which serves as what the step to the number of a step to iterate. So I can say it should start from 0, or I can omit it, and then let's say it should end at an index of, let's say, 3, but I'll just give it a step of what 1. Sorry, this is supposed to be colon, so I'm using colon again, then providing what a third integer or index. Now when I go ahead, clear my terminal and run it, now we are getting this result. So this is just similar to not passing anything. Now when not passing, whenever I pass one, it's just similar to not to just this, okay? But when I go ahead and then pass 2 here, let's see, so it prints Python and then jumps Rust and then prints what JavaScript. So you should take note of that, as so that we can provide what a third index. Then this index can also be what in negative. So when I go ahead and then put maybe -2 here, let's see our result. That is giving us an empty list. So I'll just omit the end here because our list is so small. Let's see, now we are getting what C++ and then Rust. So because it will start from here, from the end of the list, and then to jump JavaScript, and then now it will go to what Rust in that order. So you can put in any number of elements in this list and then try it out for yourself. Now one thing we should note is that we can reverse this list using what -1. So let's say I want to reverse this list, I can just pass in, I will omit the first, which is the starting index, then the ending index, then I'll pass in -1 here, which will reverse the list. So when I go ahead and run my file, now you see that it is printing C++, JavaScript, Rust, and then finally Python. Then one thing we can also do is what I can copy this list by what omitting the starting and then the end index. So let's say I want to return what an exact copy of our list. I can what omit the start and what the end index, and then maybe the third index, which is what the jump or the step. Now when I go to my terminal and run my file, you see that this is giving us what an exact copy of what the list. So you should take note of that. So when I go ahead and say slice list is equal to languages, let's see what it will print in the terminal. It is printing what true. Don't be disturbed by this double equal to sign. We'll talk about it in a later video. So you see that it is giving us what? True over here. So it means this slice list and then the languages list are the same. So you should take note of that. Now, since lists mutable objects in Python, we can change it. Okay, we can access a value and then change it, or we can access an element of the list and then change it. So let's look at that. So let's say I want to change this C++ to C. I can say languages, then I'll assign it to what? Languages, and then what is the index of what? C++. So this is 0, 1, 2, and what? 3. Or better still, since C++ is at the end of the list, or I can pass in what? -1. Then I'll assign it to, let's say, Java, like this. And then when I go ahead and then I'll just print languages. When I go to my terminal, clear it and run my file, you see that now C++ has been replaced with what? Java. So lists are mutable. So we can access an element of a list and then change it to something else. And better still, I can access a portion of the list. So let's say I can access from index of 1 to index of, let's say, 2 or 3. And then I'll change it to something like another set of lists. I'll just put maybe 1, 2, 3 and then I'll just assign it to a different portion of, maybe I can just put Java here. When I access that and then run my file, now you see that from the 0 index to the second index has been changed to what? Java. So since this is a string literal, it will what? Iterate through it and then put something there. So it's being replaced with our Java string over here. So we can mutate a list as well. So you should keep that in mind. Now, the next thing I want us to look at is what? List method. So let me go ahead. So Python provides us with some built-in methods that we can use to work with list or mutate a list. So let's look at that. So in order to look at some of the methods or attributes that we can use to work with a list, I'll just say print dir. Using the dir function, I'll just put list here, which is the list object. When I go ahead and run my file, this gives us a list of all the attributes or methods that we can use to work with a list. So forget the ones with the underscore and then come down here. So you can see we have some methods over here like append, clear, copy, count, extend, index, insert, pop, remove, reverse, and then sort. So these are some methods that we can use to work with a list. So let's look at this method, some of this method. The first method we'll look at is the append method, which adds a single item at the end of the list and returns none, or returns the none type. So let's look at that. So I'll just say languages and then dot. So since this is a method, we use what? The dot operator. So when I write languages or the name of the list, then dot, then I'll say append. So as I wrote the dot, you can see that my text editor is giving me auto completion of the methods or the attributes that can be accessed on this list. So let's talk about the append. So over here, I'll just say you should add, let's say, TypeScript to the end of the list. Let me write that properly. And when I come down here and then print out the languages, let's clear the terminal and then run my file. You see that now TypeScript has been added to the end of the list. So mind you, the append method can just be used to add a single item. When I try to put something else here again, you see that I'm getting error. So you have to just pass only one argument. Now the next method we'll talk about is the insert method, which adds a new item at a particular index in the list. So now let's look at the insert method. Let me comment this out. So I'll just say languages dot insert. So let's say the first argument we have to pass is the index we want to insert the new value. So let's say I want to insert as an index of 0. That is the first position. And then what do I want to insert there? I want to insert, let's say, Java over there. When I clear my terminal and run my file again, now you see that Java has been added to the beginning of our list. So you should keep that in mind. So that's the use of the insert method. The next method we'll talk about is the extend method, which adds multiple items at the end of the list. So let's say I'll comment this out, and then I'll say languages dot extends, and then over here I'll just pass a list of some languages. So I have C here, I'll put comma here, then I'll put, let's say, Java, put comma here, and then I'll say I'll just put this language over here and save Mojo language here and save. Now when I go ahead and then clear my terminal and run my file, you see that now these languages have been added to what, the end of the list. So as you can see, we have C here, Java, and then what, Mojo over here. So we can do that as well. The next method we'll look at is the pop method, which removes an item from the list and also returns the removed item. So I'll just come here and then I'll say language gist dot what, pop. Then I'll go to my terminal, clear it, and run my file. Now you see that it has removed what, C++ from what, the list. So C++ is no longer part of our list. It ends on what, JavaScript. When I go ahead and provide an index here for, or the index of an item to remove, let's say I want it to remove what, Rust. So I'll just put an index of 1 here. When I run it, you see that now Rust has been removed and C++ has been retained. So you should take note of that this is how the pop methods work. So we can call it by not passing any argument, so an optional argument, and then we can call it by passing what, an argument, which is the index of the element to what, remove. So let's say you know an element to remove and you know its index, you can use what, the pop method. The next method we'll look at is what, the remove method, which removes an element from the list. So let's say you don't know the index of an element and you want to remove it from the list, we can use the remove method. So I'll just write remove, and then I'll just say you should remove JavaScript. And when I go and then print the list, you see that now JavaScript is no longer part of our list. So this is how we use the remove method. The next method I want us to look at is the clear method, which removes all the items from the list and makes it empty. So when I go ahead and say languages.clear and then go to my terminal, I'll clear my terminal and run my file, you see that we are getting what, an empty list, or our list is what, empty. The next method I would like us to look at is the sort method, which is used to sort the elements of a list. So let's look at the sort method quickly. So I'll go ahead and then say languages dot sort, and when I go ahead and run my file, you see that now our list has been sorted in alphabetical order. So as you can see, so we are now having C++, JavaScript, and code. So when I go ahead and then maybe add something like Java, and then add something like type script, and then maybe add go here, and go ahead, clear my terminal and run it. Now you can see that our list is now sorted nicely for us. So let's say I declare a list of what, numbers. So I'll just say numbers. I'll just pass some random numbers here quickly. Let's look at the sort method. So I'll just say print, I'll just say numbers dot sort, then I'll say print, let me write that properly, print numbers, and run my code. You see that our numbers have been sorted properly. So that's what, the sort method. Now let's say you want to sort your list but in a reverse order. You can pass in a positional argument, a positional argument here called what, reverse equals true. So I'll just go ahead and then comment that of the numbers out. So I'll comment this out, and let's work with our languages. So I can say reverse, and then I'll set it to what, true over here. When I go to my terminal and run my file, we get what, our list sorted by in what, descending order. So it's no longer from the in alphabetical order. Okay, so it's in the descending order in some way. So when I comment in my numbers over here, uh, list over here, and then I pass reverse and then true over here, when I run my code, you see that it has been sorted by in what descending order, that's from the highest to the lowest. So you should take note of that we can pass this reverse argument over here. Okay, so that's it. Now let's look at another method called what, the reverse method. So I'll just go ahead, comment all this out, and then this one also. Let's look at the reverse method. So the reverse method, like you already know, reverses the order of the elements of the list. So I'll just go ahead and say languages dot what, reverse. And when I go ahead and run my file, let me first of all clear it and run my file. Now you see that our list has been what, reversed. So it's just reversed the list. So the last element of the list becomes what, the first element of the list. So if you want to get the list in a reverse order, but it should be sorted, then you can use what, the sort method, as we looked at earlier. So we said what, languages dot what, sort, and then we can say reverse and then true. So by default it is what, false. So you put what, reverse true here. So when I go ahead, comment this out and go to my terminal and run my file, you see that we are getting our list in reverse order, but it is what, sorted. So you should take note of that. Now let's look at some built-in functions that we can use on what, a list. So Python provides us with some built-in functions we can use to work on list. So let's say we want to get the number of elements in a list, we use the length function. So I can say print, and then the length function, I'll pass the list to it, which is what, languages. When I go ahead and run my file, you see that we are getting 7 outputted here. So that's the length of what, our list. So you should take note of that. The next method we'll look at is what, the main function. So let's say I'll go ahead and say numbers. Okay, I'll just copy my numbers variable quickly. Where is it? It is over here. Just copy it and put it here. Let me comment this one out. So we can use this. So I can say print, then with the main function, I'll pass in the numbers variable, and this will what, give us the the smallest numbers in the list, or the smallest value in the list. I don't know if it works on strings. Let me try it. I've not tried that. So let's see what we'll get. I'll run my file. You see that it's giving us what, C++. So maybe that's the smallest value in this list, C++. So you can use it on string as well, but mostly you use this on what, integers. So that's it on the main function. So since we have the main function, we have the max function as well. So I'll just clear my terminal. So I'll just come down here and say print, and then since these things return a value, I'm not assigning it to any variable. I'm just printing them straightforward to the terminal. So since these main functions, or these functions, the length function, the main function, and then the max function return a value, you have to store it to a variable before you can make use of it. But since we will not make any good use of it, I'm just outputting them in the terminal straightforward using the print function. So I'll just pass max here, and then I'll pass languages, and I'll go to my terminal and run. You see that we are getting what, TypeScript, and then the minimum is what, C++. So when I change this to numbers, the numbers list, obviously we are getting what, 89, because it's the highest value in this numbers list. Now finally, let's look at the sum function, which returns the sum of all the elements of the list. So I'll just go ahead, comment these ones out, and say print, and then I'll say sum, and then I'll pass in numbers here. When I clear my terminal and run my file, you see that we are getting the sum of what, all the numbers in this list. I don't know if it works on strings. Let me pass in the string here. You see that I'm getting an error over here in my terminal. So we cannot use the sum function on what, strings. So we should always use it on what, integers or floats. Okay, we can use it on floats. So when I change this to numbers, and then maybe I pass in some floats here like this, and go ahead and run my file, we are getting this value over here in the terminal. So that is it on some of the functions that we can use to work on lists. So let's move on and talk about tuples. What are tuples? Tuples are ordered sequence of elements, but they are immutable, which means that once a tuple is defined, it cannot be changed. So unlike list, tuples, they are immutable. We can't change their values. So let's look at how we can define what? A tuple. So I'll just come to the top here, and then you're still using my, I'll just declare a variable called usernames, then I'll assign it to a tuple, and then a tuple, a literal is this what? Parenthesis. I'm getting an error here because let me just comment this out. Good. So over here I can put, let's say, usernames. I can say Bob, and then maybe Tim, say Alice, and then I'll say maybe Tom, and save. When I go ahead and then print type of what? Usernames, go to my terminal, clear it, and run my file. You see that we are getting class of what? Tuple. So this is how we define tuple. We put them in what? A set of what? Parentheses, or in parentheses. So that's what we call what? A tuple literal. So like list, we can also create a tuple using what? The tuple what? Function. But most of the time, we'll create a tuple using what? This syntax. And mind you, tuples are what? Immutable. It means we cannot change them. So when I try saying usernames, and then maybe at index of, let's say, 2, and then try to assign it to something else, you see that I'm even getting what? Error. My terminal, my text editor is telling me that what? This will result to an error. So when I just put some name over here, let me just put full here, so that we will get what? An error. When I go and then run my file, we are getting what? Tuple objects does not support item assignment. So we cannot change the values of what, or the elements of what? A tuple, but we can access them and then print them out or work with them. So that is what? A tuple. Now when I declare a tuple, when I can declare an empty tuple like this, so let's say empty underscore tuple, and then maybe like this. But let's say I want a tuple of only one element, so maybe a unit tuple. I'll write it like this. So I'll write it and then maybe put 2 here, and then put what? Comma over here. So whenever you declare an empty tuple, it's like this. But let's say you declare a tuple with only one item or one value, you should always put what? A comma at the end, so that it will not look like what? A function call, or you are trying to write an expression. So you can declare an empty tuple like this, or you can declare a tuple with what? Values, or you can declare a tuple, a unit tuple like this. So that's it on tuples. Now let's look at how, what we call tuple unpacking. So since this tuple username is here, I'll just comment these ones out. We can unpack it. That is, we can what? Get the individual items from this tuple and then assign it to what? A different value. So let's say I want to unpack this. I can say first name, and then maybe second name. Let me just write this properly here. Then let's say third underscore name. Then I'll assign it to what? The username tuple like this. Now since the last one, I'll just put an underscore here. So this underscore will tell the interpreter to ignore the last one. Or I can go ahead and say maybe fourth underscore name. Now when I go ahead and then try to print this, let's say first name, and then let me be second name, then I'll just print up to what? Third name. When I go to my terminal, clear it and run it, you see that we are getting what? The values from what? The tuple. So this is what we refer to as what? Tuple unpacking. So let's say I don't want to access team, or I don't need team. I can put an underscore here like this. Now team is no longer available. When I go ahead and run my file, you see that our code runs without an error. And we can do what we call list unpacking tool, so we can unpack a list. So when I go ahead and then copy my languages list over here, just comment these ones out and then try and then put this in. I didn't talk about this earlier, so let's say I want to unpack this, so I can say Python. Let me just let me see, it's too long, so I'll work with numbers, the numbers right now. So I'll just say numbers, then let's say 2 4 6 8. So let's say A, B, C, and D. Then I'll assign it to what? Numbers, like this. So we can unpack what? A list as well. And when I go ahead and then print this, A, copy this down, B, copy this down, and then C, and run my file, you see that we are getting the values. So this is what we call what? List unpacking, or what? Tuple unpacking. So that's all for this video. Please, if you like this video, please subscribe and like and comment for more videos and contents like this. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.